Welcome to Nightmare at 3 a.m. From now on, I'll be your company. Here, we dive into real stories, things we've seen on Reddit, heard from others, or sometimes that people send directly to us. So tell me, where are you watching from? What time is it for you? We'd love to know more about you. And hey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Turn off the lights. Get comfortable, because tonight I'll be sharing stories that all started with something as simple as a post on Craigslist, but they ended very, very badly. You ever take a job without asking too many questions? Yeah, me too. I used to think that kind of detachment was a strength. Like, if you don't ask, you can't be held responsible for the answers. But I've learned something lately. Ignorance isn't protection. It's just a quieter kind of guilt. It started with a Craigslist ad. Easy work, immediate pay. No details, just a phone number. I didn't hesitate. I needed the money, and I've never been the kind of person to overthink simple things. Or maybe I was just desperate enough to pretend it was simple. The guy who met me at the gas station, well, he looked normal. Nondescript jacket, tired eyes, voice like someone who'd given too many instructions in his life and didn't care if you followed them anymore. He handed me a small box, taped up, heavier than it looked, and a folded slip of paper with an address. "Deliver it. Don't open it," he said, and I didn't. The first delivery was easy. A quiet neighborhood, house with an overgrown yard, porch light off, even though it was nearing dusk. I left the box on the steps, knocked once out of some instinct, and walked away. The money hit my account within the hour. I should have felt relief. Instead, it was something else. Not quite pride, not quite fear. I kept doing it. Different boxes, different addresses, always the same rules. Deliver, don't open, don't ask. The pay was good, too good, if I'm being honest. And each time I told myself that it wasn't my place to wonder. But I did. And here's where I need to ask you something. What would you do if someone handed you a sealed package, no questions, just cash? Would you ask what was inside? Would you refuse? Or would you, like me, convince yourself that silence is a kind of safety? On the fourth delivery, something strange happened. The address was scribbled messily, almost as if it had been written by someone in a rush. Or maybe drunk? No, that's not the word. Distressed. Yeah, distressed. I pulled up to a rundown house, one of those places that looks abandoned, but somehow isn't. You know the type. Curtains drawn in the middle of the day, yard full of forgotten toys. As I walked up the steps, I hesitated. The door was slightly open, not wide, just a crack, enough for me to hear. Something, a faint rhythmic sound. Breathing, music, I couldn't tell. And suddenly, a line from a song popped into my head, like my brain was trying to fill the silence. "Hello, darkness, my old friend." You know it. Simon and Garfunkel. The sound of silence. It felt too on the nose, but there it was. That lyric's always haunted me. I should have left the box and walked away, but instead, I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. So I left the package on the porch just like before and got the hell out of there. But the next morning, I couldn't shake it. That open door, that sound. Then came the fifth delivery. When I saw the address on the paper, my chest tightened. It was familiar, too familiar. A street I hadn't driven down in years. Not since, well, it doesn't matter. Or maybe it does. But I can't quite remember why I stopped going there. Some falling out. A friend? No, a cousin. Yes, my cousin. And suddenly, I was gripping the steering wheel, sweating, staring at the crumpled paper in my hand. Would you keep going? Because I did. And I don't know if that makes me brave or just complicit. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. You ever realize too late that you're already in too deep? That's where I was, sitting in my car, engine idling, staring at the house I used to visit every summer as a kid. My cousin's place. Funny how memory works, or doesn't. I couldn't remember the house number at first. For a second, I thought it was 314. No, 341. Yeah, 341. But when I checked the slip of paper again, it was 347. Close enough to make my stomach turn. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Like the air itself was holding its breath. The house looked different, of course. Peeling paint, weeds, strangling the front steps. The kind of decay that doesn't happen overnight, but from years of someone giving up or disappearing. I sat there for what felt like hours, but must have been minutes, fingers drumming against the steering wheel, thinking about that box sitting on the passenger seat. What the hell was I doing? Let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have driven away, pretended you never saw the address, never recognized the house? Or would you have carried that box up the steps like I did? Because I did. I got out, box in hand, heart racing so loud I could barely hear anything else, except there was a sound, a low, persistent hum. It wasn't until I was halfway up the steps that I realized what it was. A song, playing softly from inside the house. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. The absurdity of it hit me like a punch. This surreal operatic song floating out from a place that looked utterly dead. Part of me wanted to laugh. The other part wanted to scream. I knocked. Nothing. Knocked again. The music kept playing like no one was there, or like they wanted me to think that. I should have left the box on the porch, walked away like before, but I didn't. Instead, I turned the knob. It wasn't locked. The door creaked open with that kind of slowness that makes your skin crawl, even when there's no reason for it. And then I saw it. A chair in the middle of the living room, facing the wall. On the chair, a phone, screen glowing, recording? I don't know what possessed me, but I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned beneath me loud enough to drown out Freddie Mercury's voice in the next verse. The box in my hands suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. And then the phone vibrated. Once, a text popped up on the screen. Leave it there. No name, no number, just those 3 words. My hands were shaking as I set the box down on the floor next to the chair. That's when I noticed something else. On the wall, above the chair, someone had scrawled a phrase in red paint. You're part of this now. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a fact. Like something I should have realized long ago. I backed out of the house one step at a time, heart pounding, throat dry. When I reached the car, I sat there, staring at the front door, half expecting someone to come running out or something worse. But nothing happened. Just that damn song still playing, as if nothing about this was unusual. I drove away, didn't look back, didn't get paid either, not this time. But now I can't stop thinking about it. about what was in those boxes, about who was on the other end of those deliveries, about what I became by saying yes to something just because it was easy. Let me ask you, does that make me a criminal or just a coward? Would you have done the same? I keep telling myself that I didn't know, that I couldn't have known, but maybe that's the biggest lie of all. Like the song says, nothing really matters to me, but it does. It matters too much. And now I wonder, when does not asking become a crime in itself? I thought I was done. I told myself that after the last delivery, after the chair, the message, the music, there wouldn't be anything else. But the thing about jobs like this, they don't let you go. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. No caller ID, just 2 words. One more. No meeting point, no money mentioned. Like a thread pulling me back in tighter than before. Let me ask you, would you have answered? Would you have driven back out there knowing what you already knew or suspected? Because I did. The address was a warehouse on the outskirts of town, the kind of place people forget or pretend to. The air was thick, heavy, like rain was coming. When I pulled up, there was only one other car, old, gray, empty. The warehouse loomed in front of me, its doors rusted shut, except for one that was cracked open, like an invitation or a warning. Inside, the echo of my footsteps was the only sound, until I saw it. A box, smaller than the others, no tape this time. Just sitting there on a rusted table waiting, and next to it, a Polaroid, face down. You ever have that moment when you already know what you're about to see, but you flip it over anyway? Of course you do. It was me, standing in front of that last house, holding the box, looking lost and stupid and complicit. The timestamp. 2 days ago. They'd been watching me, recording me, tracking every step, and suddenly I realized this wasn't a job. It was a test. Or maybe it had always been. That's when I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the far side of the warehouse. I couldn't see anyone, but I didn't wait. I bolted. Back to my car, back to the road, back to whatever thin layer of safety I still believed in. But here's the thing. The next morning, another message. We'll be in touch. No number, no name, just that. And now every time I step outside, I feel it. Eyes on me, like the job's not over, like it never was. So let me ask you, at what point do you stop being an innocent bystander and start being part of something you can't undo? Is it when you take the money? When you deliver the package? Or when you stop asking questions because you're too scared of the answers? I keep telling myself, I didn't know. But maybe that's the biggest lie of all. Maybe the second I replied to that Craigslist ad, I was already theirs. And maybe you would have done the same. You ever feel like you're safer living with a stranger than being alone? I used to think that. Moving to a new city for grad school, broke as hell, desperate for a place that wasn't my car or some crumbling motel room, Craigslist felt practical. Not dangerous. The ad was simple. Roommate wanted $400 per month. Quiet, private room. That was it. No photos, no real description. But I reached out anyway. The guy who answered, Mark, sounded normal enough. Said he was a contractor, barely home, just needed help covering the rent. Cheap, no hassle, month to month. It felt like a win. So I moved in. The house was on the edge of the city, near those old train tracks where the weeds grow taller than your knees and the air smells like rust and rain. Quiet, like he promised. Too quiet. But at first, I liked that. I kept telling myself, this is good, peaceful. But you know how sometimes silence is just too much? Like it doesn't feel empty. It feels expectant. Mark wasn't home the day I moved in. Left a note on the kitchen counter. Welcome. Rooms at the end of the hall. No instructions, no house rules, no tour. I should have thought that was weird, but I didn't. Let me ask you, would you have questioned why someone didn't even bother to meet you in person when you're moving into their home? Or would you have done what I did? Dropped your bag, locked your door, and convinced yourself it's fine? Because that's what I did. And for a while, it was. A week went by before I saw him. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the front door creak open, heavy boots, slow steps. He walked in like he lived there, which, of course, he did. But there was something rehearsed about it, like he was performing normal. Tall, maybe late 30s, shaved head, dark eyes that didn't blink enough. He looked at me, smiled, tight, controlled. Hey, he said. That was it. Then he went straight to his room, locked the door, and didn't come out for 2 days. The next time I saw him was in the backyard, digging, middle of the night. At first I thought I was imagining it. One of those dreams where you wake up but your brain's still fuzzy. But I stood at my window, watching him with a shovel, turning over dirt near the fence line. And here's where I need to confess something. I didn't do anything. Didn't go out there, didn't ask what he was burying, didn't even ask the next morning when he passed me in the hall like nothing happened. Because I was scared. Not of him, not exactly, of what knowing the truth might mean. Would you have asked? Would you have knocked on his door and demanded to know? Or would you have kept telling yourself that it was none of your business? Because that's what I did. And maybe that was my first mistake. Or maybe it was moving in at all. You ever start noticing the little things only after it's too late? Like how Mark always kept the basement door locked, or how he never brought anyone over, never mentioned friends, family, anything, or how I never actually saw him go to work. He said he was a contractor, but now that I think about it, I never saw a toolbox or a truck or even a pair of work gloves. We just kept coexisting, passing each other in the hallway like ghosts, pretending not to notice that something was wrong. At night, I'd hear him moving around, heavy footsteps, pacing, sometimes scraping sounds like furniture being dragged across the floor, and sometimes this sound I couldn't quite place, like, I don't know, maybe something mechanical or organic? No, that's not the word. Metallic. Yeah, metallic. I remember standing by my bedroom door, holding the handle, frozen, thinking, do I open this? Do I confront him? But I didn't. Instead, I started leaving for class earlier and coming home later, hoping to avoid him entirely, which is how I noticed the next thing. One morning on my way out, I saw a woman standing across the street, just watching the house. Didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, staring. At first I thought maybe she was waiting for someone, but then I noticed something else. She wasn't looking at the house. She was looking at my window. Let me ask you, what would you have done? Gone over to her? Called the cops? Moved out that same day? Because me, I just kept walking, told myself it was probably nothing. But when I got home that night, she was gone. And Mark's boots, the ones he always left by the door, were gone too. The house felt heavier somehow. The kind of quiet that's not peaceful. The kind of quiet that's waiting for something. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I put on some music to drown out the creaks and groans of the house settling. Scanned through my playlists until I landed on something familiar. Hotel California. You know the line. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. Never thought that lyric could feel so literal. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how trapped I felt in the place I'd chosen to live. Thinking about how much of my life was built on decisions made in moments of desperation. That's when I realized something else. I didn't even know Mark's last name. Hell, I wasn't even sure Mark was his real name. It hit me like a punch. I'd moved in with a complete stranger, trusting that Craigslist was enough of a filter to keep me safe. But was it? Let me ask you, is it ever? That night, I decided I was going to leave. Pack up my stuff, get out, before anything worse happened. But when I woke up the next morning, the basement door was open, wide open, for the first time since moved in. And at the top of the stairs, Mark's boots, just sitting there, like an invitation or a trap. You ever stand at the edge of something and know whatever happens next, you don't come back the same? That's how it felt, standing at the top of those basement stairs, staring at Mark's boots. For a long time, I just stood there, not moving, not breathing. The basement was dark, the kind of dark that feels thick, like it could swallow you whole. Let me ask you, would you have gone down? Would you have risked finding out what he'd been hiding all this time? Or would you have done what I almost did, turned around, packed your things, and left without ever knowing? Because I almost did that. Almost. But then I heard it. A sound from below. Not footsteps, not movement, just breathing. Slow, ragged. Like something or someone was down there, waiting. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it could burst right out of my chest. But I took a step forward, then another, and another. The wooden stairs creaked beneath my weight, screaming louder than I wanted them to. With every step, the air got colder, damper, smelled like mold, and something else, something sweet, but wrong. I got to the bottom and fumbled for the light switch, flicked it on, and there it was. A mattress on the floor, stained, handcuffs bolted to the wall, a camera set up on a tripod aimed right at the mattress, and in the corner, a box, just like the ones Mark used to get delivered, the ones I never thought twice about, sealed up tight. I don't know why, but I walked over to it, kneeled down, and when I pried it open, all I saw were photos. Stacks and stacks of Polaroids, dozens of people, some smiling, some not, all of them here, in this basement, on that mattress. Some of them I recognized, neighbors, a girl I'd seen at the corner store, the woman who'd been standing across the street, all frozen in time, documented, cataloged, and then, the last photo in the box, it was me, standing in the kitchen pouring coffee, taken from outside the window, the timestamp. 2 days ago, that's when I heard it, the door at the top of the stairs, slamming shut. And then the click of the lock. I ran up, pounded on the door, screamed his name. But there was nothing. Just silence. That thick, expectant silence I should have noticed from the very beginning. I don't know how long I sat there staring at that locked door, thinking about all the choices that led me here, all the signs I ignored, all the questions I didn't ask. So let me ask you, when does caution become cowardice? When does minding your own business become complicity? Would you have asked the questions I didn't? Or would you have, like me, trusted a stranger because it was easier than being alone? I used to think Craigslist was just a tool, a way to make life easier. But now I know better. It's not just about what you're looking for. It's about who's looking for you. And sometimes they find you first. You ever do something just because it feels easy? Like you don't even think about it. You just need the money. You need the time filled, and it sounds simple enough to say yes. That's exactly how this started. I was scrolling through Craigslist late one night looking for temp work when I found it. Babysitter needed, one night only, cash, no questions. No questions. That should have been the first red flag, but I didn't think twice. Just answered the ad, texted the number, got a response within minutes. They sent me the address, told me to be there by 7 p.m. Didn't even ask for my name. Let me ask you, would that have stopped you? Would you have asked why they didn't care about references, about who was coming to watch their kid? Or would you, like me, just show up, figuring it's some overworked parents desperate for a night out? Because that's what I figured. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where every lawn looks exactly the same, and all the windows are covered by the same beige blinds. I pulled up just before sunset. The porch light was already on, buzzing faintly like it hadn't been changed in years. The front door was ajar. That should have been the second red flag. But again, I didn't even hesitate. I knocked softly and called out, "Hello." A woman appeared from around the corner, maybe mid-30s, wearing a loose sweater, her hair tied back like she hadn't slept in days. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for coming," she said quickly, thrusting a folded piece of paper into my hand. "Instructions are there. We'll be back late." And just like that, she and a man I hadn't even noticed, standing in the hallway silent as a shadow, walked out the door. No introduction, no small talk, nothing. The door closed, their car started, and I was alone. I opened the note. Just one line. "Check in on her now and then." Her. No name, no age, nothing. Let me ask you, would you have left? Walked right back out, called the number, and told them it was too weird? Because I thought about it for a second, but then I didn't. Because I needed the cash. Because I didn't want to seem rude. Because, I don't know. Maybe because it felt too simple to be dangerous. The house was silent, not the cozy kind of silence, the hollow kind. I walked through the living room, past dusty picture frames turned face down on the shelves, into the kitchen where the faucet was dripping in slow, steady beats, up the stairs where the air felt heavier. At the end of the hall, a closed door No light coming from underneath, no sounds. I stood there for a long time, hand hovering over the knob. Then I knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. I should have opened the door then, but I didn't. I told myself I'd check later. Gave myself permission to wait. Sat down on the couch. Turned on the TV to drown out the silence. But all I could think about was that closed door upstairs and how quiet it was behind it. You ever try to convince yourself that nothing's wrong just because it's easier? That's what I was doing, sitting on that couch, listening to the clock tick louder than the TV, pretending this was just another weird babysitting gig. But it wasn't. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, makes it hard to breathe, makes you question if you're even supposed to be there. After what felt like an hour, or maybe it was just 20 minutes, I don't know, I lost track. I finally stood up and went back upstairs. The door at the end of the hall was still shut, but this time, the faintest sound was coming from behind it. Breathing, soft, rhythmic, like someone asleep, or pretending to be. Let me ask you, would you have opened that door? Because I did. Slowly. The hinges creaked just enough to make me wince, but the rest of the house stayed dead silent. Inside, nothing. No child, just an empty room. Barren walls, no furniture, no toys. Just a small tape recorder, sitting in the middle of the floor, playing a loop of breathing. That's when my stomach dropped, and something else hit me. Something I should have noticed earlier. There were no family photos in the house. Not a single picture, just those frames turned face down. I walked over to one, flipped it up, empty. Just the glass. No photo. Like they had erased themselves from their own home. Let me ask you, would you have left right then? Because I didn't. I froze, trying to make sense of it, telling myself there had to be an explanation. That's when I noticed the note still in my pocket, the one they'd handed me when I got there. I pulled it out, read it again, check in on her now and then. But this time, I realized something I hadn't before. In the bottom corner, faint handwriting, a date. I squinted at it, tried to make it out. July 12th or 21st. No, 12th. Yeah, July 12th. But here's the thing. That was 3 days ago. And suddenly, I remembered reading something, a news article, about a family found dead in their home on July 12th. In this neighborhood. No, not this neighborhood. This street. I scrambled to grab my phone, pulled up the article, my hand shaking. The headline hit me like a brick. Family of 3 found dead in apparent murder-suicide. The address? This house. Let me ask you, what would you have done? Called the cops? Run? Because I just stood there, frozen, staring at the screen, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were reading. And then, from downstairs, the sound of the front door opening, not slamming, just opening, softly, like someone had just come home. And then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving through the living room, toward the stairs, toward me. That's when I realized this wasn't about babysitting. It never was. You ever feel like your own breath is the loudest sound in the world? That's how it felt as I stood at the top of those stairs, paralyzed, listening to the slow, deliberate footsteps moving closer. I should have run. I know that. But I didn't. Let me ask you, would you have? Because in that moment, I couldn't. Something about the inevitability of those footsteps, the way they echoed through the hollow house, it froze me in place, like I was already part of whatever was happening. Whoever it was reached the bottom of the stairs, stopped. For a second, there was only silence. Then, a voice, soft, almost gentle. "Did you check in on her?" My mouth went dry. I couldn't answer. The voice asked again, "Did you check in on her?" And that's when it hit me. The same words as the note, not a suggestion, a command, a ritual. I finally forced my legs to move, stumbled backwards into the empty room, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The tape recorder was still there, looping that slow, steady breathing. But now it sounded distorted, almost like it was getting slower or fainter, and then it stopped, abruptly. The silence that followed was suffocating. I turned back toward the hallway, toward the stairs, but there was no one there, no footsteps, no voice, just emptiness. I ran down the stairs, through the living room, out the front door into the night air, gasping like I'd just surfaced from underwater. But the street was empty. No cars, no lights on in any of the houses. Like the whole neighborhood was just gone. I sprinted to my car, tore out of that driveway, didn't stop driving until I was halfway across town, didn't sleep that night, didn't even try. The next morning, I checked Craigslist, almost as a joke, almost like I needed to see if it was all real. And there it was, the same ad. Babysitter needed, one night only, cash, no questions, same number, same address, posted this morning. Let me ask you, what would you have done? Called the cops? Told someone? Or just closed the laptop? Told yourself it was all some kind of sick prank? Because I didn't call anyone. I just sat there staring at the screen, realizing it wasn't about me, not really. It was about whoever answered that ad next, whoever thought they were just picking up a little easy cash. And maybe that's the real horror of it. Not that I was chosen, but that it never stops, that there's always someone else out there desperate enough to say yes. So let me ask you one last time, if you saw that ad, would you answer it? You ever feel like something was calling you, but you weren't supposed to answer? That's how it started for me. Middle of the night, scrolling through Craigslist, bored and broke, when I saw it. Need help identifying unknown signal, $500. Must have radio equipment. Simple. Director, I'd been a hobbyist for years. Shortwave, ham, scanning local air traffic for kicks. So yeah, I replied. The guy got back to me fast. Said he'd been tracking a signal for weeks, couldn't make sense of it, wanted another set of ears. He didn't give his name, just coordinates, middle of the Mojave, near an old ghost town I'd heard of but never visited. Let me ask you, would you have gone? Driven 3 hours into the desert for a stranger, for a signal you weren't sure even existed? Because I did. Maybe I was chasing the money, or maybe I just needed something interesting to break up the monotony of my life. Funny how sometimes boredom is more dangerous than fear. When I got to the spot, it was late afternoon. The sky stretched forever, the sun already bleeding into the mountains. He was there, mid-40s, gaunt, sunburned, like he'd been living out there for a while. Didn't say much, just led me to a battered van, parked near a rusted sign that barely read, "Welcome to Danton." Inside, equipment was stacked in chaotic piles. Antennas, converters, all patched together with duct tape and stubbornness. He pointed to a set of headphones. "Listen." So I did. At first, nothing but static. Then a pulse, even, steady, but layered beneath it, something else, almost like a voice, but too faint, distorted. I adjusted the gain, tried to isolate it, and then a word, or part of one. Ow. "Is it saying hello?" I asked. He nodded, grim. Said he'd been tracking it for weeks, always at the same frequency, always from the same coordinates about 15 miles deeper into the desert. Said it had started right after, and here he paused, stared out at the horizon, then muttered, "After they arrived." I laughed nervously, assuming he meant some tourists or hikers, but he didn't laugh, just handed me a second set of coordinates scribbled on an old gas receipt. "Want to see for yourself?" he asked. "Let me ask you, would you have gone deeper?" Because I did. Of course I did. I set up my own gear in the back of my truck, triangulated the signal, and yeah, it was real. A perfect vector leading straight into the heart of nothing. So we packed up, drove out as the sun set, the desert turning cold and alien around us. The last thing he said before we lost all cell service was, "They know you're coming." You ever feel like you've already gone too far, but you can't stop moving forward? That's what it felt like as we drove deeper into the desert. The paved road turned to dirt, the dirt to sand, and soon even the sand looked unfamiliar, like it didn't want us there. The signal kept getting stronger. Every mile the pulse grew clearer, more insistent, like something guiding us in. And here's where I should probably admit something. I wasn't just doing this for the money. No, sure, $500 is $500, but really? It was about proving that I wasn't wasting my life playing with radios and frequencies, chasing ghosts in the static. That maybe all those nights spent alone, tuning into the void, might actually lead to something real. Let me ask you, would you have gone if it meant finally finding meaning? Even if it scared the hell out of you? Because that's what I wanted. Something more. As the last sliver of daylight vanished, we stopped to set up camp near the coordinates he'd given me. Just us, the equipment, and miles of silence. Except the signal wasn't silent anymore. It was clearer, pulsing in rhythmic intervals. I recorded it, played it back, and that's when I realized something I hadn't noticed before. The pulse wasn't random. It was Morse code. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, SOS. I froze, looked over at him, but he was staring at the horizon, pale, like he'd seen something I couldn't. "It wasn't doing that before," he whispered. "Let me ask you, if a signal like that changed, would you keep listening, or would you turn off the radio, pack up, and get the hell out?" Because I kept listening, even when I shouldn't have. We decided to hike the last stretch. The van couldn't make it through the rocks, so we packed what we could and walked by flashlight, the signal growing stronger with every step. And then we saw it, a structure, half buried in the sand like it had crashed there centuries ago, or maybe landed. At first I thought it was some kind of military relic, a weather station or satellite dish. But then I got closer and realized the metal wasn't rusted. It wasn't even scratched. It looked new. No, not new. Untouched. Pristine. Like it didn't belong here at all. And that's when it happened. The signal shifted from a pulse to a voice. Clear, unmistakable. It said my name, my full name, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. Or maybe I forgot the word for it. Respiration? No, breathing. Yeah. I looked at him, the guy who brought me out there, and he just nodded like he'd been expecting this all along. Let me ask you, if something out there knows your name, would you answer? Would you step closer or run? Because I stepped closer. Of course I did. And as I did, the voice on the signal started singing a song I hadn't heard since I was a kid, my dad playing old vinyl records on Sunday mornings. Space Oddity. This is ground control to Major Tom. And that's when I realized this wasn't a rescue signal. It was a message, a test, or maybe an invitation. You ever wonder if some things out there were never meant to be found? That's all I could think as I stood in front of that structure, buried in the sand like a secret the earth tried to forget. The voice, my name, still echoing from the transmitter, layered now beneath that haunting line from Space Oddity. And I'm floating in a most peculiar way. It wasn't a malfunction. It wasn't static. It was meant for me. Let me ask you, if something speaks to you from beyond everything you know, would you answer it? Because I didn't have a choice anymore. The man, the one who brought me out here, he wasn't beside me anymore. I turned to look for him, but he was gone. No footprints leading away, no sound, just gone. Like he'd never been there, or maybe he never had been. I don't know. All I know is that the door on the side of that structure, I didn't see it open. But suddenly, it was. A soft, bluish light, spilling out, cutting across the desert floor, inviting, demanding, and the signal. It stopped. Total silence. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring into that light, feeling my whole life, every meaningless job, every lonely night with my radio gear, collapse into this one moment. Let me ask you, would you have gone in? Because I did. Of course I did. And inside, there was nothing. No machinery, no seats, just walls. Smooth, curved, humming softly like they were alive. And then the walls shifted. Not physically, I don't think, but perceptually. They began to reflect images, not of space or stars or alien worlds, but of me. Moments from my life. All the nights alone, tuning radios, the fights I'd had with people telling me to get a real job. The regrets I buried so deep, I forgot they even existed. It was like the structure had been watching me, listening, learning, and now it was showing me who I really was. And then, one final image, a map, coordinates, not here, but my home, my apartment, the street where I lived. Let me ask you, if something out there knew where you lived, would you ever feel safe again? I stumbled back out into the desert, the door closing silently behind me, the light vanishing as if it had never been there. The structure, gone. Just an endless stretch of sand under the cold desert stars. I made my way back to the truck, the equipment still running, the signal completely dead. No trace of it ever existing. No trace of him either. Just me and the knowledge that I'd answered something I was never supposed to. And now, sometimes, late at night, my radio still picks up something faint, a pulse, a whisper. Sometimes it says my name. Let me ask you, if that happens to you, will you answer? Or will you pretend you never heard it? Because I tried to pretend, but I don't think it matters anymore. Some things, once you hear them, you can't ever turn off. You ever sign up for something just because you're desperate? Not because it makes sense, not because it feels safe, but because you're out of options. That's how I ended up here. Craigslist ad, simple as always. Low risk sleep study. Generous compensation. One night only. No details, just a number and an address. I should have known better, but rent was due, and I hadn't slept well in weeks anyway. Let me ask you, would you have called? Because I did. The voice on the other end, calm, professional, said they were conducting research on sleep cycles, looking for healthy participants. You'll be monitored overnight. Nothing invasive. Nothing invasive. That phrase stuck with me because it sounded like something you say when you know people are thinking the opposite. But I didn't ask questions, just showed up. It was a medical facility on the outskirts of town, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. No sign out front, just a keypad by the door. I buzzed. The door clicked open without anyone saying a word. Inside, everything was white, sterile, silent, cold. A woman in scrubs met me at the desk, handed me a clipboard. The consent form was long, but I didn't read it. Not really. Just signed where she pointed. Let me ask you, would you have read it? Because I didn't, and maybe that was my first mistake. She led me down a hall to a small room. Bed, chair, some monitors. A single camera at the corner. You'll be connected to some equipment to monitor your brain activity, she said, then handed me a hospital gown, told me to change. I sat on the bed, the paper gown crackling beneath me, staring at the wires and sensors draped across the table. Then she came back with another nurse. Together, they connected me to the machines, leads on my chest, scalp, wrists. One of them placed a small device on the side of my neck. What's that for? I asked. The nurse smiled, too politely. Just standard monitoring. Then they turned off the lights. Try to relax, one said before leaving. The door closed with a soft hiss, and I was alone, except for the blinking red light of the camera and the slow mechanical hum of the machines beside me. The room felt heavier than it should, the kind of silence that doesn't come naturally. As I lay back, staring at the ceiling tiles, I remember thinking, it's just one night. But then, that's when the speaker crackled to life. A voice distorted, mechanical, process initiating, and suddenly, I wasn't so sure it was just a sleep study anymore. You ever realize, too late, that you didn't ask enough questions? That's how it felt, lying there, the wires digging into my skin, the machines humming like they were syncing with something inside me. The voice over the speaker repeated, process initiating, but no one explained what that meant. Let me ask you, would you have demanded answers? Because I didn't. I just lay there trying to convince myself this was fine. Just another clinical trial. Just a few hours of data collection. But then the lights dimmed completely. Total darkness, except for the faint red glow of the camera and something else. A low-frequency tone vibrating through the bed, through my body, like it was tuned to something deeper than my hearing. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in the room, not physically, but in my head. Something was happening. My thoughts slowed, stretched, like they weren't entirely mine anymore. Images flashed behind my eyes, places I'd never seen, faces I didn't recognize, or maybe I did recognize one of them, a woman with dark hair, standing by a lake, but I couldn't quite place it. My mind kept searching for her name. Sarah, no. Sophie, no, that's not right. Sandra, yeah, Sandra. But the thing is, I've never known anyone named Sandra. At least, I don't think I have. And that's when it hit me. These weren't dreams. They were memories, but not mine. Let me ask you, if you started remembering things that didn't belong to you, would you try to stop it? Because I couldn't. Every time I tried to focus on something real, the bed beneath me, the wires, my own breath, the images pulled me back. Moments of other lives layered over mine. A child's birthday party in a house I'd never lived in. A funeral on a rainy hill, hands signing divorce papers. The memories kept coming, faster, sharper, like a flood that broke through whatever dam my mind had. And all the while, that voice over the speaker kept repeating, process, progressing. Progressing toward what? I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move, could barely think. And then, through the haze of these borrowed memories, a song. So faint at first I thought I was imagining it. But no, it was there, from the speaker. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Simon and Garfunkel. The Sound of Silence. And it hit me like a punch because that was my dad's favorite song. He used to play it all the time when I was a kid. But how did they know that? Or, wait, was that even my memory? Suddenly, I wasn't sure anymore. What was mine and what was theirs? Let me ask you, if someone could implant memories so deep they felt like yours, how would you even know who you are anymore? I tried to pull the wires off, but my limbs wouldn't move. Paralyzed. Just trapped in that bed, in that room, in someone else's life. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the voice saying, process complete. You ever wake up and feel like you're not you anymore? That's how it felt when I opened my eyes. Cold air, fluorescent lights, the same sterile room, but empty. No monitors, no wires, just me, lying there in the hospital gown like nothing had ever happened. The door was open. No one in sight. No voices, no machines, not even the hum of ventilation. Just silence. I stood up, legs shaky, my body foreign, like I'd been gone for longer than a night. On the chair beside the bed, my clothes, folded neatly, and a small envelope. No name, just a typed message. Thank you for your participation. Payment has been processed. That's it. No contact info, no discharge papers, nothing. Let me ask you, would you have left? Because I did. Of course I did. Walked barefoot through the silent hallway, the lights flickering as I passed, out through the same keypad door that clicked open as easily as it had let me in. The parking lot was empty, like no one had been there for days, maybe longer. I got in my car, checked my phone. The payment was there, $500, but also something else. A new notification, a calendar event scheduled for next month. Phase 2, no details, no origin, just there. Let me ask you, if something like that showed up in your phone, would you delete it? I tried, swiped at it over and over, but it wouldn't go away. And then, the memories, not mine. The woman by the lake, the child's birthday, the funeral, all still there, vivid as anything I've ever experienced. Sometimes more vivid than my own. And when I look at photos from my life, old trips, family gatherings, sometimes I have to pause and ask myself, was I really there? Or am I just remembering something that was given to me? I called the number from the Craigslist ad. Disconnected. Of course, the website for the clinic, gone. No record of it ever existing, like it had all been erased, except for me. Let me ask you, if someone could overwrite parts of you, would you even know? And if you did know, what would you do about it? I keep thinking about that voice. Process complete. Like I wasn't a participant. Like I was the product. So now every night I wonder, when phase 2 starts, will I even realize it? Or will it just happen? Like it already did? Maybe it already has. It started quietly, the way most things do when you're not expecting your life to change. Just me, alone in my apartment on another sleepless night, scrolling through Craigslist out of habit more than intention. I wasn't looking for anything specific, but there it was, tucked between ads for used furniture and broken appliances. Seeking companionship. Must enjoy quiet walks, late nights, no expectations, just conversation. No picture, no name, just an email address. Sitting there like a door someone left unlocked. I stared at it longer than I care to admit. At first, I told myself it was just curiosity, but if I'm honest, it was loneliness. A kind of loneliness I hadn't said out loud yet. So I wrote. Something simple. Hi, I like quiet walks and late nights too. I hit send before I could think about what I was doing. Didn't expect a reply, but it came just an hour later. Thank you for reaching out. Tell me about yourself. No games, no weird questions, just interest. And that's how it began. We started exchanging messages almost every day. I told him about my job, the hours that stretched too long, and the co-workers I barely spoke to, about my cat. Independent, surly, but always there in the quiet moments when no one else was. About my favorite place to go when I couldn't sleep, a little park bench by the lake where the city lights reflected just enough to make the water look infinite. They replied with stories of their own, about watching the stars from a cliff near their hometown, listening to the waves crash below, the kind of silence that makes you feel small in a good way. They even sent me a photo of the spot, a narrow weathered bench perched near the edge of a sheer cliff, the ocean endless beyond it. This is my favorite place, they wrote. It felt like we understood each other in that strange, quiet way that doesn't need too many words. Isn't that what most of us are looking for? Not just someone to talk to, but someone who listens the way you hope they will. The messages kept coming, day after day, night after night, until it felt like I knew them better than most of the people in my real life. They never asked for a photo, never pushed for more than I was willing to give. It was easy, comfortable, and in a way more honest than most of my actual relationships. So when they finally suggested we meet, it didn't feel strange. It felt inevitable. They told me to come to their favorite spot, the one from the photo, a cliff by the ocean, a couple of hours up the coast. Park by the old lighthouse and follow the trail, they said. That was it. Simple directions, like we'd known each other for years. I took the day off work, packed a jacket, some snacks, and drove. The lighthouse was exactly as they'd described, rusted, leaning slightly like it had been holding its breath for decades. The trail was overgrown but still there, winding through pines and brambles until it opened suddenly to the cliff. The same view, the same jagged rocks below, the ocean roaring in steady, indifferent rhythm. And there, just like the photo, the bench. I walked toward it, heart pounding for reasons I didn't fully understand. That's when I saw it, a small brass plaque, weathered but legible, in memory of, and then their name, the same name that signed every message, the same name I'd come all this way to meet. It stopped me cold. A name carved into metal, marking someone gone. I stood there for a long time, the wind tearing at my jacket, staring at that plaque, trying to make sense of it. What would you have done? Because I just stood there, too stunned to even sit down, too afraid to open my phone and check, in case the next message was already waiting. For a long time, I just stood there, the sound of the waves below, the cold air biting at my skin, and that brass plaque staring back at me like it was waiting for something. It didn't make sense. How could it? We'd been talking for weeks, sharing stories, small details, favorite places. All of it felt real, more real, honestly, than most of my friendships. And now, their name set in metal, like it had always been there. I sat down slowly on the bench, half expecting to find some other clue. A note, maybe, or a message scratched into the wood. But there was nothing, just the view, the same one they'd sent me in the photo. I took out my phone, scrolled through the messages again, rereading them like maybe I'd misread something. But no, the tone was consistent, the details vivid, the kind of things you can't fake unless someone had. And that thought settled in my stomach like a stone. The idea that maybe I wasn't the only one reaching out in loneliness. Maybe I'd been answering something that wasn't someone, or wasn't anymore. I don't know how long I sat there. At some point, I noticed someone had left a small bundle of flowers by the base of the bench, wilted but carefully arranged. That's when I realized I wasn't the first person to stand here reading that name, feeling this confusion, this ache. There had been others, maybe dozens, maybe more. What kind of person leaves behind a presence so strong that strangers still feel it, still answer it? That's when I remembered something they'd said in one of their early messages. Something about music. How they'd always loved Simon and Garfunkel, especially the boxer. And suddenly, without thinking, I started humming it under my breath. I am just a poor boy, though my story's seldom told. It hit me differently now, not just as a song, but as a confession. Isn't that what all of this was? A story seldom told? Or maybe a story told over and over to anyone who'd listen? I sat there, staring out at the ocean, wondering what I was supposed to do next. Should I go home? Should I don't know, leave something here like the flowers? The wind picked up, sharp and relentless, and I pulled my jacket tighter, realizing how exposed the bench was. That's when I noticed my phone buzz. A new message from them. Just one sentence. Did you find it? My breath caught in my throat. How was that possible? I checked the timestamp. It had been sent 5 minutes ago. But there was no signal out here. I held the phone up, checked the bars. Nothing. No service. I must have stared at that message for a full minute before realizing my hands were shaking. I tried to reply, typed out yes, but the message wouldn't send. No connection. No way. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it did. Maybe this was always part of it. That's when I felt the first drop of rain hit the back of my neck. And suddenly I remembered I had left my jacket, no, my backpack, at the car, right? Wait. No. I had it with me, didn't I? I spun around, scanning the ground near the bench, but there was nothing there. No backpack, no water bottle, just me and the plaque. And that stupid message still glowing on my phone screen. Did you find it? Would you have stayed? Or would you have walked back through the overgrown trail, back to the car, back to safety. I stood up, looking one last time at the view, then back at the path. It felt different now, like it had grown longer in the time I'd been sitting there, like it wasn't quite leading to the same place I'd come from. The trail felt quieter on the way back, more deliberate, like every step was being measured, like the air itself had thickened. The trees closed in tighter, their branches clawing at my sleeves, at my skin. It wasn't just the path that had changed, it was me. Something about sitting at that bench, reading that name, receiving that message, it had shifted something I couldn't quite name. By the time I reached the lighthouse, the rain had picked up, slicking the stone and turning the dirt path into something slippery and treacherous. But my car was there, just like I'd left it, or so I thought. As I fumbled for my keys, I noticed something on the windshield. Tucked under the wiper blade, a note, folded, damp at the edges, but the ink hadn't run. It was their handwriting, the same as their messages, just 3 words: "Thank you, goodbye." I looked around, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the sound of the rain and the waves crashing somewhere far below. No one, just the lighthouse, the trail, the empty parking lot, and me, standing there, holding a note from someone I knew was supposed to be dead. Would you have left it at that? Driven away? Pretended none of it ever happened? Because I didn't. I got into the car, turned the key, and sat there, staring at the steering wheel, soaking wet and shivering. And that's when my phone buzzed again. Another message from them. "I'm glad you found it." No punctuation, just that. I didn't reply, didn't know what to say. What could I say? But I couldn't bring myself to delete the messages either. Instead, I put the car in gear and started the long drive home. The rain washing away the last traces of the path behind me. The closer I got to the city, the more it all started to feel unreal. Like maybe I'd imagined it. The plaque, the note, the message. But when I got home, everything was still there. The message thread, the photo of the cliff, the note, crumpled and damp in my jacket pocket. And later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something that made my stomach knot up in a way I couldn't shake. I wasn't sad that they were gone. I wasn't even scared. What I felt was gratitude for the connection, for the strange comfort of having been seen, even by someone or something that shouldn't have been able to see me. And that's when it hit me. Maybe the point wasn't about whether they were real. Maybe it was about whether the connection felt real, and for me, it did. Does that make me naive? Desperate? Maybe. But it also makes me human. Would you have felt the same? Or would you have been too scared to answer in the first place? Sometimes I wonder how many others got the same message. How many walked that same trail, sat at that same bench, stared at that same plaque and thought, why me? And I think maybe that's all anyone really wants. To be chosen, to be answered, to not be alone, even after.